Okay, hello and welcome back, everyone. This is Space Potatoes Episode 5 again. Re-recording this. I had done it previously, and I'm at a different location, and I'm going to redo it. Big update. We have a lot to add in this episode. I'm going to be adding the sort of outer envelope of the game, where we'll have a start screen where you can push a start button to start the game. Also, we'll do the outros, which is when a player dies, restarting the level. We're going to add lives, multiple lives for the player. So restarting after player death when the game is not over, and also the game over sequence. Like I said, it's sort of the outer envelope. And then I think there's a couple of other things we're going to add in that whole process. We'll write, I believe, 2 new functions. Let's get started. If we head over to the animation tab, there is an animation that's been added, and that is the start button. This is a sprite that is in the library. If you search for start button, you'll get this. And I modified that by adding a yellow border to it because it's a black button, and black on black, you wouldn't be able to see the edge of the button. So I just added a quick yellow border. And I believe that is all I've done with the animation tab. Let's go back to the code. Variables. We're going to add 3 or 4 variables. And the first one is we need a couple of toggles to kick in to run the code sequences for the introduction screen and the outros. So our first one's going to be intro toggle. And we'll set that to true because we want the intro to run right when the program starts. The next one is the game over toggle. And we will set that one to false until the game is over. Then we're going to add a score and live. I'm going to go down here and add a score variable and a lives variable. And we'll start with 2 extra lives, so 3 lives total. And then finally, we need a variable to restart the game after the player's died, but is not out of lives. So we're going to do restart after player death, set it to false. That's all for new variables. We now need to create a couple of sprites that are the extra lives that will sit in the upper right-hand corner here. So we need 2 more sprites, and we'll scale them down. So I'm just going to grab this, paste it twice, and we'll call these extra ships player 2 and player 3. These are just going to be the little ship icons. We'll start this one at 32015. The next one will be at 34015. This also needs to be player 2, player 2, player 3, player 3. And we're going to scale these down to 0.07. Okay, let's see if those show up. Yep, there they are. We can get a better look if I set the camera zoom back to 1. So this indicates I have 2 more ships. Next, we're going to change the name of a previous variable, and that is down here on what's now line 61. I changed this from player died to player died toggle. I guess I wanted to indicate that was a toggle. I took a long pause on this project and I'm coming back to this after several months off, so I'm trying to kind of bring myself back up to speed. But I changed this to player died toggle, which means we have to change it everywhere it appears below, and we'll kind of do that as we go. But let's finish adding sprites, and that's going to be way at the bottom. I'm going to go down here and add the start button. I'm going to start that at 200-250. That should do it for the start button. Let's see if that shows up. Nope. Oh, we got to fix all those variables we just changed. We'll test it in a minute. I'm going to take out these debug commands because I haven't used them forever. And okay, we are down to the draw loop. And there's big changes for the draw loop. So we're going to wrap everything we have here in an outer envelope that's going to be in a bunch of if-else statements. And those blocks of code are going to run the introduction when the program starts. They're going to run the sequence when a player dies and restarts, and they're going to run the sequence when the game is over. So we're going to first do the introduction. So we're going to say if our intro toggle is true, then we're going to run the intro sequence. And if that is intro toggle is not true, our next conditional is going to be else if restart after player death equals true. We're going to restart the player, we could say, at the current level. So that's when the player dies, but the game is not over. And then we need the sequence of code to execute if the game is actually over, else if game over toggle equals true. We're going to run the game over sequence. Now, if none of those things are true, that means we want to start the game. We want to actually go into all of our update functions. So we're going to say the final check is else, and that's going to be start the game. And then we're going to put else start the game, and we're going to put all of the update functions into there. So I'm going to move all of that up here. Indent. Okay. So that's the whole outer envelope, and I'm going to indent all that so we can see that that lives in the draw loop. All right, lots of stuff going on here. I'm going to also now add the new functions that we're going to code. One of them is going to check if the player died, and I'm going to put that down here after update AP collision. Check player died. Then if the player has died, we'll run the sequence. And we're actually going to move some code from some of these functions that we wrote previously into the check player died function, I believe. So that'll be fun. Then we're going to draw sprites. Then under draw sprites, we're going to update score because we're going to be using draw commands to write things on the screen. So we want to put that after draw sprites. Those are the new functions. Let's keep going. I'm just going to keep going top to bottom here. So we're going to go into updating all the functions now. First one is update player, and I'm going to put a conditional around this as well. And that's because if the player dies and the game is not over, we're going to make the player invisible. But we also want to stop it from moving. So we need to disable these commands. So we're going to put a if function around everything here that's if player died toggle is true. No, that's not what we want. We want to say if it's false, then we're going to enable the player controls. So we're going to indent all that, and then we're going to close this here. That way, when the player dies, but the game's not over, the player died toggle becomes true, the player controls are disabled. And that's all for that. Let's close that. Update laser, there's nothing. Close that. Update alien hit, there's nothing to that. Update alien motion. Close that. Not updating that yet. Update bomb. We are going to update this function, update bombs. And we want to go down to the part where we have all of these code blocks where if the bomb is touching the player. So if we look at these code blocks when the bomb touches the player, we move the explosion to the player's location. We move the player off screen. We set the player died variable to true, which is not the player died variable anymore. It's the player died toggle. We set that to true to indicate the player died. We reset the burst animation so it plays from the beginning, and then we play the burst sound. But we repeat all of this over and over again for each bomb. And also, if the player runs into an alien, we also essentially repeat that as well in the update alien player collision function. And we don't really need to repeat that over and over and over again. We can move that into its own function and then just call sort of like the player death sequence function. So we're going to move some of this stuff, and this is the way it's going to look. I'm going to delete everything except these last two. I'm going to delete everything but play sound. The first thing we're going to do is move the bomb off the screen. So we're going to change the bomb's X and Y position so it's off screen. Then we're going to set the bomb's Y velocity to 0 so it stops falling. And we do need that player died variable, but we changed it to the player died toggle, and we want to set that to true. And then we're going to play the sound. And that's all we're going to do here. That's all we need to do immediately when the bomb touches the player. So we need to copy this down into each of the following code blocks that follow for each of the bombs. So I'm going to grab this, copy it 4 times, and then I need to change all of the 1s to 2s and so on. Okay, now what follows here still in this function is the death sequence, what to do if player died becomes true, and this is going to end up being deleted. But I'm going to leave this here for now so I can remember that it needs to move into the function that's going to be our player death update, check whether the player has died function. So we're going to leave that for now. We're going to move on to update alien player collisions because we just need to do the same thing where we're going to be deleting some of this code and moving it. So it's kind of the same thing here. We're going to move the alien. We're going to set the player died toggle to true, and we're going to play the sound. That's it. So I'm going to delete this stuff. Actually, I think I can just kind of copy the code from up here, like if the bomb's touching the player, what we just wrote. All we're keeping is the play of the sound, and this should be alien 2.x, alien 2.y. I think that we want alien 2.x. We want to stop the alien. We want to stop the alien from moving in the back and forth. That should be alien 2.velocity x equals 0. Player died toggle equals true, and play the sound. That's it. Now we need to make that change for all the other aliens. Why did I start with alien 2? I don't know. Alien 1, alien 1, alien 1. Where are we moving them to? Negative 200, negative 50. That needs to change to negative 200, negative 50. Okay, looks good. This needs to be indented. Alien 333. 444. 555. Okay, that brings us to the end of the updates of the functions that we already have. Mostly. We're going to now work on the update score function and the check if the player died. The check if the player died is the complex one. So I'm going to do update score first because it's the low-hanging fruit. This is about 6 lines. Real basic for now. So we set the text size and the fill, and then we're writing the word score to this position on the screen, and then we're writing the value that's stored in the score variable next to it. And that's it for that for now. We can change later, make it fancier, whatever. Okay, so now we're going to do the sequence when the player death sequence. So every time through the draw loop, we're going to check to see if the player died. So to indicate that the player died, we remember flip the toggle, the player died toggle to true. So we need to check that. And if it's true, we need to pause for a second so we can show the exploding ship animation. So we're going to start incrementing our death pause counter. And now that I think about it, this is the sequence that's already coded above, remember? I said I was going to leave it and delete it later. So that's up in the update bombs function, way at the bottom, where, the player has died. We update the death pause counter. We play the explosion sequence. And then when the pause counter's gotten to a certain threshold, we reset our variables, move the explosion off the screen, stop it, and so on. I actually made a couple of changes there. So I think instead of just copying this code down, I'm just going to delete this whole shebang. Okay, back to the bottom. If player die toggle is equal to true, we increment the death pause counter, and we're actually going to make the player disappear, so we're going to do player.visible equals false. We're going to start the burst animation. That's burst 2, the player burst, the player ship explosion animation, player burst 2.play, and we're going to move that burst from off screen to the player's location. So we need to have a little time for that to play, and then when we get to a death pause counter of 20 or more, we're going to go through the process of resetting variables. So we want the player die toggle to become false again. We want the death pause counter to be reset. We want to move the player off the screen. We want to move the burst off the screen. Put him back at 600. And we need to decrement is that a word, decrement? Negatively increment? The player's lives, we need to decrease it. So it's going to be lives minus minus. And then we have to check to see if doing that brings our player past its last life. And if that's the case, we need to trip the game over sequence. Otherwise, we just need to restart them like at the level they were at. So if lives is less than 0, then it's game over. And we need to set the game over toggle to true. Okay? But if it's one of the other two possibilities, lives is equal to 1 or 2, we just need to restart the game. We're going to do it like this. We're going to make the player visible again. I have player.visible equals false here. That doesn't seem right to me, but I'm going to go with it. And then restart after player def equals true. The longest variable name ever. Okay, and then we're going to copy that in the event that the number of lives is 2. If lives is equal to 2, meaning it's the first time the player's died, those lines are going to be the same. Player.visible equals false, restart after player def equals true, and we finally need to set the burst frame to 0, so set the burst animation to the beginning point for the next time it's needed, so it starts at the beginning. And that's it? Oh wait, except that's not really it, because we still have to go way back up here to our beginning of our draw loop and code the sequence for the intro, restarting the player after it dies, and then the game over. So let's jump into that. Okay, intro toggle, let's do it. If the intro toggle is true, we're going to play the intro screen. What's that mean? We're going to make the background black. And we're going to write Space Potatoes to the screen. Text size 30. I went with teal, not sure why. Stroke weight of 3. Stroke is, again, teal. And we're going to write Space Potatoes at 7120. We're going to draw the sprites to the screen so you can see the aliens and the player. And then we need to add the controls for if the player presses the play button. So if mouse pressed over the start button sprite, if that happens, we need to stop the intro, so intro toggle becomes false. We need to stop the intro music. And the intro music that I used was Show Me a Hero middle loop. That's it. We need to start our aliens moving, so we're going to set their x velocity to 5. alien velocity x equals 5. Then we have to write that to each of the aliens. So alien 1.velocity x equals alien velocity x, which is 5. Then we need to do that for aliens 2 through 5. And then we need to move the start button off the screen to 600 negative 50. And that should do it for the intro. Although I realized that I missed a line up here above the draw loop to start the sound, play the sound when the program starts. So we're going to put that up here. Instead of stop sound, it's going to be play sound. And that should do it for the intro. So we can now go to the code block that will run after the player dies, but the game is not over yet. And first thing we need to do is we only want this code to run once, so we're going to change restart after player death to false. And then we're going to copy all of these. We need to set the alien velocity, the aliens in motion again, so we're going to copy all this down. We need to put the player back on the screen, because remember, when the player died, it remained on the screen for a moment while we ran the burst animation, and then we moved the player off the screen. So we need to move the player back to a start position, which is 10350. And then we also made the player invisible, because we didn't want to be able to see the player while the burst animation ran. So we need to set the player back to visible. And that should be, move my comment back to the top here. That should be it for restarting after player death, I think. Now we can move to what do we do when the game is actually over? And that's going to be a simple one. We're just going to write game over to the screen. We're going to black it out. We're going to write game over to the screen. So background black. In a big 50-point text size, I decided on yellow, game over. We're going to write game over. We're going to put that at 7160. And that's it for the game over sequence. So I think we have to set, don't we have to set the game over toggle to false? You know, I didn't set the game over toggle to false, because then we wouldn't see this, because it would only be on the screen for a second. We want it to remain on the screen. I'm going to comment that out. I'm going to take that out. Take it out. Otherwise, start the game. And I think, I haven't tested this, I think that we're ready for a test-a-roo. Let's see what happens. The error here is that I forgot the space between function and update score. Reset run. Okay, we got some errors. My aliens are moving off the screen, and we're not seeing space potatoes. Let's fix that. If we go all the way back to the top, I think that I can change alien velocity x to 0 for beginners, because then when the game starts, we give them a velocity. So we're going to put that at 0. Let's see if that took care of that problem. Okay. Now they're not moving. Okay. Let's find out what happened with the space potatoes. I think I see the problem right here, and that there's no end quote there. I didn't like that. There shouldn't be a quote here. There we go. Let's try that. There it is. Okay, reset. We have an error on line 147. Is that old? No. Can't figure out what update score is. That's a capitalization error. That should be lowercase. Okay. Take care of that. Now we just don't have our aliens moving. I'm going to take a look at, I'm going to collapse update bombs, update alien player collision, update score, check player died. I'm gonna check update alien motion here. Looks okay. It says it. You know what I think it is? I think that these need to be lowercase. Another capitalization error. which means they all need to be changed down here as well. That's tricky because my variable for velocity has a capital velocity, capital V. But when we do alien1.velocity x, it's a lowercase v. I think that's the problem. Yep. Okay. Our score's not updating. Got some weird stuff happening with the death sequence and the score. Let's fix that. So, after running this a few times, a couple things are happening. The first thing that I notice is that when the player dies, it can die twice. So, because we're not immediately moving the player ship off the screen, so like if another alien hits it or another bomb hits it after it's already been hit, it reruns that animation. You can see. Well, let me try again. You see how we got two sounds there. The reason that I didn't move the player off the screen immediately is because when that sequence runs, we move the burst to the player's location. So if we immediately move the player off the screen, instead of just making them invisible, the burst also moves off the screen. So there's a way to fix that. I'm not sure I want to go into that right now. That might be for the next update. The other thing that's happening is when the player collides with an alien and dies, some of the aliens are being reset up above and they're moving. Let me try and demonstrate. I'm going to set the camera back to 0.7. See that? So that's only two of them. That's weird. Does this guy do it? Our ships are also not disappearing, and we're not getting the game over sequence. Okay. I see an error under update alien player collision. On alien 3, this should be not alien3.x equals -250, but -200. Same with alien 4 and alien 5. I'm wondering if that could account for the strange behavior there. No, that wasn't it. Yep, this update is already too long, so I'm going to fix these. These problems are going to be fixed in the next episode because I'm doing some more restructuring of the death sequence code. So we'll deal with that next time. Thanks for watching if you've made it this far. And tune in next time for episode 6 of Space Potaters.